Is, and we will begin with the second half of chapter 2, and we will conclude upon reaching the end of that. And look who's here to assist us with this reading. We have Onyx. Onyx is a very appreciated presence in this one. The duration of a transit without any turns is 1 time unit. 1 time unit is the smallest indivisible unit of time. A transit without turns, even to the edge of cosmic space, is possible in a single time unit. Transits with 1 turn take 2 time units. With 2 turns take 3 time units. And with 3 turns take 4 time units. The soul in transit remains without nourishment for 1 or 2 time units. The soul in transit remains without nourishment for up to and including 3 time units. The soul in transit for 1 time unit receives nourishment, but it relieves, and so there is no time unit when it is not nourished. Similarly, when the soul transits for 2 time units, it receives nourishment in the first time unit before it leaves, and in the second time unit when it arrives. However, when the soul transits for 3 time units, taking 2 turns, it receives nourishment in the first and third time unit in the manner explained above, but there is no nourishment in the second time unit. Similarly, it's a word I need to work on. When the soul is in transit for 4 time units, the second and third time units pass without nourishment. Similarly. It's like tough for my diction skills. I think of the phonetics of it. In the tradition of SS, the maximum number of time units without nourishment of 3, because the last time unit in the journey is also without nourishment. As begins the types of nourishment. According to one tradition, there are 3 varieties. Sap of the parents is drawn by the karmic body of the soul while in the womb. Nutrients such as air and water absorbed through the pores of the skin of the whole physical body. And the elemental food taken through the mouth of the gross body as solid food and drink. I think when it says gross, it means like gross income, like rather than like ew, gross, you know. Okay. In the other traditions, 6 varieties of nourishment are identified as nourishment for the karmic bodies, nourishment for the material bodies. Other than the karmic elemental food, nourishment through pores of the skin, sap drawn in the womb from the parents, and nourishment from the mind. In the SS, nourishment is defined as the absorption of clusters as matter, suitable for making the gross protein and conveyance bodies, and the 6 maturations of the development of the capacity to ingest nourishment, the body, sense, and respiration, speech, and mind. I believe we have a question, and it says, basically, will we be reading the Bible at some point? Yes, we will also be reading the Bible at some point. So stay tuned for that, and it's something I look forward to greatly. So, hello to everyone tuning in. We are currently reading That Which Is a book on Jainism, which is somewhat similar to Hinduism. There are 3 types of births. by agglutination of material particles, by the womb, and by descent. Now that the transit from the place of death to the place of the next birth has been explained, this sutra explains the types of birth. The agglutinations of material particles is how all beings with 1, 2, 3, or 4 senses are born. Some five-sensed animals and humans are also born this way. As well as this form of asexual reproduction, there is also reproduction in which the sperm and ovum meet outside the parents' bodies. Like in a lab? Interesting. Bodies being born of this method are invertebrates, without a backbone, and hermaphrodites. They have both female and male sexual organs, and without physical mind, without the power of thought. Am I loud for the speakers? Somebody's mentioned the volume of my tone. I'll have to do a sound check later, but I can't right now. You can turn down your volume though, if necessary. All insects, worms, and animals not born of the womb belong to this class. In this first type of birth, the soul absorbs material particles that lie at a spot of its birth and uses the power of its karma to convert them into an agglutinated body. Birth in the womb is dependent on a sexual relationship. The soul absorbs zygote, formed by the semen and blood or ovum in the womb of the mother, and builds it into gross physical body, the fetus. But it puts an O in there. Maybe that's like an earlier development point of the fetus. F-O-E-T-U-S. Okay. Birth by descent is without parents and with a fully developed body. Infernal beings and gods are born this way, building their bodies out of the protein material particles which can change form. The soul of the would-be gods goes to a site in the heaven covered with a celestial robe, which is in turn covered with celestial wrapper. It builds its protein body with the material particles available there. The soul of the would-be infernal beings goes to a vessel-like place with a narrow opening in the infernal lands and builds its protein body with material particles lying there. The SS explains that the nature of the worldly soul's births is determined by the fruition of karma bound to the soul because of its good and bad propensities. The 9 main varieties of birthplaces are occupied by living things only. Cold, covered, occupied by living things only. Hot, uncovered, occupied by living and non-living things, both hot and cold in part, and have covered and uncovered in part. The place of birth is the site the soul reaches after its transit to a new birth. The variety of birthplaces listed above describe the 3 aspects of any birthplace: the nature of the substances that occupy it, and its temperature, and whether or not it's covered, in a womb dwelling or open air. For each aspect, there is a choice of opposite or combination of the 2. According to SB tradition, the birthplaces of gods are occupied by non-living things, both hot and cold, in part covered. The SS differs on the second aspects, saying that the temperature of the gods' birthplaces is either cold or hot. No child left behind. There's some interesting comments if you're able to check the live comments on this later. The SB tradition describes birthplaces of infernal beings as occupied by non-living things, cold or hot or both, covered. Again, the SS differs regarding temperature, saying it is either cold or hot. The SB tradition describes the birthplaces of being born in the womb as they are occupied by living and non-living things, hot and cold in part, covered and uncovered in part. The SS explains that the birthplace is occupied by living and non-living things because the semen and ovum are inanimate, while the mother is a living thing. The birthplaces of beings with 2, 3, and 4 senses and of 5-sensed humans and animals not born of the womb are occupied by living things or non-living things, or by both cold or hot, or both in part uncovered. The birthplaces of the fire-bodied varieties of immobile beings are occupied by living things or non-living things, or by both hot covered and cold, covered. The birthplaces of other four varieties of one-sensed immobile beings, that is, the earth, water, air, and plant-bodied beings, are occupied by living things, or by non-living things, or by both cold or hot, or both in part and covered. The different places of birth described in the sutra are distinguished from the different types of birth. A place of birth is the base, whereas the birth is the act of the soul entering the base. The varieties of places of both are said to be 8,400,000, distributed according to the varieties of living things as follows. Varieties of living things. Beings destined to be submicroscopic vegetation eternally. Beings destined to be submicroscopic vegetation temporarily. Earth-bodied beings. Earth-bodied beings are water-bodied beings, fire-bodied beings, air-bodied beings, vegetation, beings with 2 senses, beings with 3 senses, beings with 4 senses, celestial beings, infernal beings, animals with 5 senses, and humans. However, the basic varieties in 1 through 6 are 350, in 7 they are 500, and in 8 they are 300, in 9 through 11 they are 200, and in 12 they are 700. The varieties of 700,000 are arrived by the multiplying the basic varieties in each case by 2,000. This figure is the total number of permutations of 5 colors, 2 smells, 5 tastes, 8 touches, and 5 shapes. 5 times 2 times 5 times 8 times 5 equals 2,000. For the types of colors, see 5.23 and 5.24. We're not there yet. Viviparous and oviparous animals and vertebrates without placenta are born in the womb. Infernal beings and gods are born by descent. The 3 types of births mentioned in 2.32 are now related to the species which they govern. These 2 sutras describe the 2nd and 3rd types. Viviparous animals, that is vertebrates born with placenta, include humans, cows, buffaloes, goats. The oviparous or hatched beings include snakes, lizards, chameleons, tortoises, and birds. The vertebrates without placenta include porcupines, elephants, hares, and ichneumon. Elephants don't have placentas? Interesting. All other beings are born by agglutination. This first type of birth includes the immobile, one-sense beings, earth, water, air, and plant-bodied. Beings with 2, 3, and 4 senses, and the humans and 5-sensed animals are not born of the womb. The humans born of agglutination originate in human excreta, such as feces, urine, sputum, mucus, vomit, bile, pus, blood, and semen. Their lifespan is very short. Has there ever been a time where humans were born in this way? Or is there a time in the future in which these items which carry DNA with them could be used to create and replicate a human? Maybe this is written in a different time where different technologies were available than we have now. I have to keep an open mind here. Their lifespan is very short. Their tiniest lifespan is 2 avalikas. See Appendix 2. And the animals of this category are born outside the cosmic region inhabited by humans. The 5 types of bodies are gross, protean, conveyance, fiery, and karmic. The description of the soul's birth complete. We now begin the description of the bodies with which souls make for its life. The 5 bodies given above are made for different purposes. The gross body is described by the SBT as visible, bulky body made from the suitable classes of material clusters. For the 8 classes of material clusters, see Appendix 5. The protein body is made of clusters of matter with various supernatural powers. The SS describes the supernatural forms of protein body can assume as subtle, huge, light, heavy, able to reach any distance, walk at will, and exert lordship, subdue, etc. The conveyance body is made from the clusters of matter that are auspicious, white, and pure. The SS gives the 2 purposes of this body as seeking knowledge on subtle problems from the distant, omniscient ones, and avoiding injury while in transit to subtle living beings. Such a body is used by an ascetic who is endowed with self-restraint, but is not yet free from laxity. To actually acquire such a body, the ascetic must have reached spiritual stage which is free of laxity. Let's seek a definition of laxity. Laxity is a tendency of being too easygoing or not strict enough. If your teacher doesn't punish her math class for climbing out the classroom windows, she may be accused of laxity. And laxity is not a trait that's good for being a pack leader with your dogs. And that is the main subject of this channel, is canine stewardship. So laxity is a trait that we want to strike out from our being if we want to be the best for our dogs. Because dogs need discipline, they must be obedient, and they need our guidance. That's the DOG of dogs. Discipline, obedience, and guidance. So we must offer the type of authority that a pack leader offers their pack. Okay, back to the book. The fiery body is made of fiery particles. It is a permanent possession of the worldly soul. The ordinary function of the fiery body is to digest food for the nourishment of the gross body, but through certain austerities, it can become capable of transmitting hot rays to burn or cold rays to cool an object at a distance. The karmic body is made from suitable clusters of matter. It is a subtype of a body making karma, but at the same time, it is the basket that holds all karmic particles of the soul. It is the seed from which all bodies are grown by the soul. The 5 bodies are progressively finer. The gross body is composed of thinly assembled clusters of matter. The protein body contains denser and more numerous clusters of matter. That increases in number and density continue progressively with the conveyance, fiery, and karmic bodies. However, the volume of these bodies does not increase. The protein body contains innumerable times the cluster of matter in the gross body, and the conveyance body contains innumerable times those in the protein body. The karmic body contains infinite times the infinite number of material clusters in the fiery body. These 2 sutras explain the increasing density of the 5 bodies. The number of material clusters in the fiery body is infinite times the number of the conveyance body. The SS likens the dense and less dense bodies to the difference between a ball of iron and a bundle of cotton. The last 2 types of the body travel unobstructed. This sutra begins the explanation of distinguishing characteristics of the fiery and karmic bodies. When 2 gross bodies meet, there is a collision, but when 2 subtle bodies meet, or when a subtle body meets a gross body, it is like a fire meeting an iron ball. There is no collision. Since both the fiery and the karmic bodies are subtle, there is nothing to prevent them coexisting in the same soul. The movement of the subtle bodies is unobstructed. The movement of the subtle bodies is obstructed only when they reach the border of the cosmos, because beyond the border there is neither the medium or the motion nor the medium of rest. And they have been associated with the soul since beginningless time. The association of the fiery and karmic bodies with the soul has no beginning in the sense that they are never absent from the soul during its worldly existence. However, the fiery and karmic bodies are changing from moment to moment, and so do have a beginning in the sense that they are constantly becoming something new. Each continues to exist in a sequence of mutual cause and effect, just as trees follow seed and seed follows trees in an ongoing cycle. Unlike fiery and karmic bodies, the gross protein and conveyance bodies are the only occasional and not continual properties of the soul. All worldly souls have these two types of bodies. There is some controversy about the beginningless association of these two bodies with the soul. It is noted in the SB that some teachers held the only karmic bodies is associated with the soul since beginningless time. According to them, the acquisition of fiery bodies depended on the practice of specific austerities. Successful practitioners acquire the power to emit cooling and burning rays as a form respectively of favor and curse. However, later authors were generally agreed about the beginningless coexistence of karmic and fiery bodies. The double role of the fiery body to digest food and, following the practice of appropriate austerities, to emit burning and cooling rays across a distance has led scholars to interpret the fiery body and the fiery power as two independent entities, though in fact the latter is only an attribute of the former. Including the fiery and karmic bodies, which are necessarily coexistent with the soul, up to 4 bodies can be simultaneously available to a worldly soul. According to those who affirm the necessary coexistence of karmic and fiery bodies, 5 combinations can be present simultaneously in worldly souls: fiery and gross, fiery, karmic, and protein, fiery, karmic, gross, and protein, fiery, karmic, gross, and conveyance. According to those who accept that only the karmic body is associated with the soul from the beginning of time, the possible combinations are 8. Karmic body alone, karmic and fiery, karmic and gross, and karmic and protein. Karmic and gross and protein, karmic, gross, and conveyance. Karmic, fiery, gross, and protein. Karmic, fiery, and gross. Variant reading adds conveyance. Combination of all the 5 bodies is not possible because the protein and conveyance cannot coexist. These 2 bodies are acquired through the practice of 2 different kinds of austerities. By ascetics possessing specific qualifications, the body can be acquired in succession, but they cannot be activated at the same time. The last type of the body, the karmic, cannot serve the purpose of pleasure or pain. The purposes served by each body touched upon the 2.37 are now explained further. The karmic body cannot produce pleasure or pain on its own. These must be experienced through the operation of the senses and or mind. Moreover, the karmic body cannot bind fresh karma or eliminate or suppress past karma. These services are provided by all other bodies with the exception of the fiery body. Although the karmic body cannot serve any of these purposes or those listed below, it is the underlying cause of all instruments of suffering and enjoyment. The fiery body is, like the karmic body, unable to bind, suppress, or eliminate karma, but unlike the karmic body, it is unable to set up any activity in the soul. It provides the fire, that is, the energy for the activity of the other bodies. The gross body of a human or the subhuman, animals and plants, experience pleasure and pain through the physical mind and or senses. For gods and infernals who do not have a gross body, the protein body serves this purpose. The conveyance body helps the soul reach the jina, omniscient religious founder, when it is seeking information. The protein body enables gods, infernals, some animals, and also ascetics to assume different shapes. For the gods and internals is also the medium through which they experience pleasure and pain. The first body, the gross body, is formed in the womb or by agglutination. The protein body is formed at a birth by descent. The protein body can also be created by the power potential acquired through practicing spiritual austerities. These sutras begin the explanation of the origin and the nature of the 5 types of bodies. The protein body produces through the power potential of humans and animals born of the womb who have undergone the necessary austerities is to is superior to the protein body of the infernals and the body producing as their body of birth. Air-bodied beings also have the power potential needed for protein bodies, but this is not acquired by austerities. Their gross body has protein potential inborn. Translator's notes. Power potential is a capacity for action, from the mundane doings of daily life to the supernatural acts of hurling fire, emanating rays, and creating protein bodies. The fiery body is also produced by power potential. The commentators all agree that karmic body is a permanent possession of the soul until its liberation, whereas the gross protein and conveyance bodies are generated by the power potential of the soul. However, there is uncertainty over whether or not the fiery body is permanent. See 2.44. The SS says that there are two permanent bodies, the karmic and the fiery, but there is a second fiery body that can be produced by the power potential. The SBT says that both karmic and fiery bodies are permanent, but the power of the latter is activated by the power potential. The SB does not consider the fiery body permanent in a way that the karmic body is. It explains that the fiery body in all living things resulted from the specific austerities in 2.49. It affirms the sutra to the extent that the fiery body may be due to the power potential. The conveyance body is made of auspicious, pure, non-obstructed, and non-obstructed matter. It can be created only by learned ascetics conversant with the 14 books of the early literature. The conveyance body is made of auspicious, pure, and non-obstructive and non-obstructed matter. Only an ascetic who is self-restrained but prone to laxity uses this body. The conveyance body is used by a learned ascetic to enable him to approach the jhana and shed light on different scriptural questions. However, the description of ascetic and the SS varieties are as prone to laxity suggests that the desire to use the conveyance body is sort of greed, which is detrimental to spirituality. An ascetic enjoying freedom from such greed would not use this body. Unlike other bodies, the conveyance body is very short-lived. When ascetics has any doubt in his mind about the meaning of a very difficulty and obscure issue of the doctrine, he uses the conveyance body, expands his soul into the subtle body, reaches the distant jhana instantly, and withdraws to the gross body within an intra-hour, less than 48 minutes. The conveyance body is abandoned as soon as the mission is completed. The expression auspicious matter in the sutra means that the clusters of matter that constitute the conveyance body are pleasant in color, odor, touch, and taste, and that they produce merit. Pure matter implies that the clusters are transparent, shiny, and conducive to harmless conduct. Unobstructive and unobstructed matter signifies that these clusters have free, unimpeded movement to the destination. The SB also introduces the discussion of the origin of various bodies. The fiery body, like the conveyance body, can also be created as a power potential. The karmic body in its own cause and is also the cause of other bodies in the same way that the sun illuminates both itself and also other objects. The SB details the ability of the protein body to take different shapes. It can become one and many. It can be as small and innumerable part of the finger and as big as a mountain. It can be visible, invisible. It can be terrestrial and aerial. It can be resistant and non-resistant. It can create all forms and shapes simultaneously. Regarding the size, the gross body can somewhat exceed 1,000 yojanas in the length. The protein body can somewhat exceed 100,000 yojanas, and the conveyance is 1 cubit. The fiery and karmic can also be as big as cosmic space. Regarding duration, the gross body lasts at least 1 intra-hour and up to 3 pit measured units of time. The conveyance body lasts in an intra-hour. The fiery and karmic bodies are internal possessions of the worldly body. The infernal beings born by agglutination are necessarily hermaphroditic. Hermaphrodites. The gods are never hermaphrodites. The other varieties of living beings have one of 3 genders. Having described the 5 possible types of body or worldly beings, the author now begins the description of possible genders. 2 aspects of gender need to be distinguished: physical sex, and sexual disposition. Whereas the physical sex refers to the sexual organs, the sexual disposition refers to the emotional attitude, irrespective of the anatomy. There are 3 kinds of physical sex and a sexual disposition: female, male, and hermaphroditic. The physical sex and sexual disposition may not be correlate. According to the doctrine of karma, the body-making karma determines the physical sex, while the rise of the quasi-passions of the conduct-deluding karma determines the sexual disposition. Let me read this again. According to the doctrine of karma, the body-making karma determines the physical sex, while the rise of quasi-passions of the conduct-deluding karma determines the sexual dispositions. Underline that portion. Seems very relevant to today's times. Okay. The hermaphroditic sexual organ is caused by the inauspicious body-making karma, and the male and female sexual organs by the auspicious body-making karma. The infernal beings and all those born by agglutination, and that is the one-sense beings, earth, fire, water, air, and plant body, those with 2, 3, and 4 senses, and the human and animals not born of the womb are all hermaphroditic. All worldly souls up to the 9th stage of spiritual development are of male, female, or hermaphroditic sexual disposition. In the 10th to 14th stage of the spiritual development, there is no disposition. For the 14th stage of the spiritual development, the vertebrates born with placenta, viviparous, or without placenta, and the beings which have hatched from an egg, oviparous, may be female, male, or hermaphroditic. Each of the 4 classes of gods are either female or male. According to the SBT, the mansion, Sylvan, and luminous gods, and the empyrean, like empty without a T, and then R-E-A-N, so empyrean gods, dwelling in Sadharma and Asana, the first and second heavens, are of either female or male dispositions. First and second heavens, so is there like a VIP heaven and then like a regular heaven? Okay. Higher gods, then these are always of male disposition. As the levels of celestial life become higher because the greater spiritual attainment in previous lives, there is a gradual sublimation of sexual disposition. The lifespans of beings who are born by descent, destined to attain liberation in their current life, very noble, or destined to live for innumerable years, cannot be ended prematurely. The lifespans of beings who are born by descent, destined to attain liberation in their current noble life, or destined to live for innumerable years, cannot be ended prematurely. Now, the lifespan of worldly beings is addressed with specific reference to those whose allotted lifespan cannot be prematurely curtailed. The beings born by descent are the infernals and gods. There are 63 very noble beings, 24 spiritual forward makers, 12 supreme lords, 9 brothers of the lords, and 9 rivals of the lords, being destined to live for innumerable years, are found among the humans and animal populations. The lifespan of other beings can be ended prematurely by poison or contact with poisonous objects, weapons, emotional impulses, distress, accidents, and suffocation. The SB explains that the fulfillment of the lifespan determining karma is merely hastened to the case of premature death by poison and weapons. Although made to produce its effect early, the power of the karma remains intact. The SB introduces the idea the lifespan karma for a soul's current life is bound to the soul at a particular moment in its previous life. Karma that was loosely bound is vulnerable to premature termination. Karma that was closely bound is invulnerable to premature termination. The SB compares the closely bound karma of the invulnerable lifespan to the closely pressed bale of dry hay that, when ignited, burns slowly and gradually part by part. The loosely bound karma of the vulnerable lifespan is likely like a loosely bound bundle that burns quickly, fanned by the wind. A soul involuntarily reduces its lifespan through agony and fear of death. The soul's angst instigates a process in which it expands its own space units beyond the gross body, thereby reducing the length of lifespan, determining karma. So, like, stress isn't good for you. This accelerates its experience of the full fruits of the past good and bad karma. The illustration given is of the soul being like a wet cloth, which, when fully spread out and exposed to the elements of sun and wind, dries more quickly than a tightly folded cloth kept in a shaded place. So this is the value of emotional temperance. You'd be more like a shaded cloth, not one that's going to get dried out in the sun to the exposure of stress and stress-like feelings. Angst. Even lifespans that are not vulnerable to premature termination may be vulnerable to trouble and pain, though not fatally so. Others are invulnerable to such things. All right, that concludes chapter 2. We'll begin our next reading at chapter 3. Thank you for tuning in. This has been another presentation by Canine Training plus Human Development with Adonis. We have chapter 1 and 2 of this completed, and this is the third video of that process. We've also read Bhagavad Gita, and we've read some of the Quran. We'll be getting back to the Quran soon, and we will soon be getting to the Bible, the Torah, the Kybalion, and other spiritual works. Thank you for tuning in. Much love.